You don't know how great I am. You don't know how great I am. I am what I am, and I am free. You don't know how great I am.
Yo, check this. I might not be what you want me to be, so you might not see what you want to see. But if you got a minute, listen to what I gotta say, cause it's a brand new year and it's a brand new day. See, there's a gap between my culture and the life that I lead, so some will call me an apple, and some a bad seed. They have no idea how my heart will bleed. Their words and attitudes are things I just don't need.
You don't know how great I am. I am what I am, and I am free.
You see, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of where I'm from. Those ones spreading racism, they're just fucking dumb. Now if you're looking at my life, and you say I've assimilated, to simplify things, just a little more complicated. See, I'm a modern day native, with a modern day life. I have modern day problems, and modern day strife. Now I hear other natives, they talk about the past, and will I do the same? Fuck that. See, I've got no time to dwell on what's already done. I've got too many things that I want to do. And they don't include knives, and they don't include guns. I'm talking about knowledge and sharing it too. See, my people need to learn how to cohabitate, get rid of the anger, and get rid of the hate. We gotta stop for a minute and learn to educate. And you'll see in the end, we all have to communicate. I know there'll be a time to make a stand and a time to fight, but if you do that, make sure the cause is right. Because if the cause is right, and the cause is just, greater numbers of people will be backing you up. History has repeatedly shown to us all that united we stand and divided we fall. They were talking about natives and natives alone, because this is a big world, and this world is our home. Now I've seen some beautiful people, and ugly ones too, and there's no single color that comes into view. So the message I'm sending, it's not all that long. It's just, I want the human race to be stronger than strong. I said I just want the human race to be stronger than strong.
You all have to be strong.
Done it. Word.
We all have to be strong. Peace.
Sigoli sound. Sigoli swagwag gali hindi niyo gets wagi sliwagi ni wakitaloda oni daag ngwe wenege ani bojol danse okinapi how yanko yukodonas. And for those of you who just got here, first of all, I want to say chrysanthemum Yanko for the resub. 4 months you've been here now as a member of the community, probably longer than that. But I appreciate your support. So thank you so much again. So for those of you who are new, or for those of you who don't know what I said, I always introduce myself in my original language. So I said Sagoli Sawagwag, or hello everyone. Um, Galahindi is my name, and it translates to clouds passing over in the colonial language. I'm a member of the people of the Standing Stone First Nations of the Thames on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Delaware, and Huron nations here on the northern part of Turtle Island that's been segregated and relabeled Canada. Within that territory, I'm in a small section called Southwestern Ontario. And I said, Yonko, Yukodona, or thank you, friends, for being here and welcome, greetings. Today is not really a very well planned out stream because um, I wasn't quite sure I wanted to uh, cover this, but I suppose to be truthful, this really is necessary um, for all people to be aware of the epidemic that's going on Turtle Island, and that's the colonial violence against Indigenous women, girls, and the Two Spirit Plus community. And I guess part of it is that we just came off of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, which was on September 30th, was a day that we took to acknowledge, honor, and recognize the students of residential schools, those that survived as well as those that didn't, and the families of those students, along with the intergenerational effects that the residential schools have created. So Canada really has two huge issues. Um, the intergenerational schools or the residential schools, and also what we call MMIWG or two plus, which is the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people. So part of what happened with that is that the government requested a report be done, an inquiry to be done into missing and murdered Indigenous women, and to come up with um, some calls for justice and a report to kind of explain what needs to be done. So part of that report, as you can see, I've tried to post in chat here are links to that report having started in 2016, the final report being published in 2019, so really not that long ago. So the report included 231 calls for justice. So yesterday was National Day of Action for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and 2S plus community members, which is October 4th. So October 4th of every year. And so yesterday there was a vigil held on Parliament Hill here in Canada, and to bring awareness and to remind this current government of the issue. And so had a couple of things I wanted to share in relation to that today. And part of the thing is that um, two of the what we call calls to justice that are in that report are first 11.1 says we call upon all elementary, secondary, and post-secondary institutions and education authorities to educate and provide awareness to the public about missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people, and about the issues and root causes of violence they experience. All curriculum development and programming should be done in partnership with Indigenous peoples, especially Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people. Such education and awareness must include historical and current truths about the genocide against Indigenous peoples through state laws, policies, and colonial practices. And it should include, but not be limited to, teaching Indigenous history, law, practices from Indigenous perspectives. And the use of their voices will guide us and with children and youth. And then 11.2 says we call upon all institutional service providers to develop and implement awareness and education programs for Indigenous children and youth on the issue of grooming for exploitation and sexual exploitation. And if you have a red dress, there's uh, you can always hang it somewhere, much like people on National Truth and Reconciliation Day will wear orange shirts. Um, Others will hang red dresses somewhere publicly, able to so that people in the public can see them as a way of kind of showing their support. So the other thing, of course, is a part of educating and bringing awareness is to provide resources for people to be able to access those reports. And so that's what those links are now. The first one is the link to the full report, which is online. The second one is a progress report. So every year there's a report that's done on where we stand as far as those calls to justice. And so that part of it is the report, and that gets updated once a year. So that's the current one. That link there is the current one for 2022. And then, of course, the Family and Survivors Circle. That is just a website and a resource for members who are uh, either have someone close to them or know of someone that close to them who has either gone missing or been murdered, etc., and feel like they need some sort of emotional support, and that would be a great resource for those people. So today, what I'm going to do, I also wanted to, at the same time as I do this, uh, possibly show you. For those of you who don't know about the Peaceful Warrior Project, I have a brand new rendition of the Peaceful Warrior that was done by a couple named Reese. Okay, named Reese and Mariana, and they call themselves the Bylines. They have done a rendition of the Peaceful Warrior. I think is really it's jazzy, and it's the first time jazzy. I did not expect. To be quite honest, a jazzy rendition of that song. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. And Real John Doe, Yanko for the Prime. 3 months you've been subbed now. I appreciate your support as well. All the support that my community's brought me, and I'm grateful for, and I feel honored that you feel that this channel is worth supporting, and just being here is support in itself. So when you go above and beyond, I'm that much. Just thank you. So getting to the purpose of today's stream, I wanted first of all, because yesterday was the truth or the day for calls of action day. I'm going to show a quick short clip of a news clip here that took place here. Actually, maybe I can just minimize me here. There you go. And I'll show you this news clip first of all that was on APTN about the vigil in Ottawa here, and why we do this every year.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Cries for justice rose from communities across the country as people came out in honor of Canada's missing and murdered Indigenous women for the annual Sisters in Spirit Vigil. The actions began early in Ottawa. Here's Annette Francis with more.
The morning began with a special delivery to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's mailing office. Pamela Hart made the trip from Toronto to drop off 4,000 cover pages of missing or murdered Indigenous women and girls. She says the momentum from the National Inquiry for Missing or Murdered Indigenous Women has fizzled out.
So we're here today to try and remind the government here in Ottawa that they have a responsibility, that there is a call to justice for each and every Canadian across Turtle Island.
And later those words were echoed across the lawn of Parliament Hill. Bridget Tolley is the organizer of today's event. After her mother's death, she founded the organization Families of Sisters in Spirit as an advocacy group for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
17 years. We've been on the Hill now, calling for change, calling for justice. 17 years later, we're still here calling for the same thing.
A few hundred people, including family members, senators, and MPs, gathered to share their support to families and listen to their calls for action. Among them was Megan Gallagher's family. She went missing 2 years ago in Saskatoon. Her dad, Brian, shared a poem called Megan, Where Are You?
I sent you a text. I say your phone is dead. Baby girl, where are you? People are asking about you.
With developments still fresh, he commended the families for their efforts to continue coming out.
But I just wanted to make a quick remark on your 17 years and what you've been doing is having an impact because the words are getting out there. And I would like to take a second to commend the Saskatoon Police Services and all that they've done, because as of on the weekend, human remains have been found for our daughter. And it's been because of their hard work. And I think if we're looking for models to start to build new relationships, they might be something that you could check out.
Megan's older sister, Lindsay Bishop, is walking across Canada to bring awareness to the issue. She began in Victoria last February and plans to be in Newfoundland by December.
Any type of visibility is important to keep people talking and to keep the word out there to, how do I say this, to help stop the atrocities that are happening across Turtle Island to our missing and murdered.
Grandparents, please. We need your help. Please take care of our baby girl. Merci. Thank you.
The families are hopeful to see more action by next year's annual event. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Families in British Columbia used the day to draw attention to what they call police mishandling of their loved ones' cases. As APTN's Sarah Connors reports, families and their supporters want better accountability from police when it comes to cases of missing and murdered.
September 29th would have been Tatiana Harris's 21st birthday. But on May 3rd, the 20-year-old Cree and Métis woman was reported missing. Her body was discovered the day before, on May 2nd, on this yacht in Richmond. But her identity wasn't confirmed as the woman on the yacht until 3 months later.
The police handling of Tatiana's case came with many flaws.
That's why her mother, Natasha Harrison, and other families are speaking out.
The list of neglect continues. The communication with law enforcement and to the family and the community has come to a halt.
In honor of Sisters in Spirit, Amnesty International Canada held a virtual press conference for families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Family members shared their experience of police negligence and mismanagement in the investigations of their loved ones. Brenda Wilson's 16-year-old sister Ramona Wilson disappeared in 1994 in Smithers. Her body was found by the Smithers Airport in 1995. Wilson says she's frustrated more hasn't been done.
And when are we going to have answers? When is there going to be accountability?
The Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs says more services and supports are needed for family members, as well as a change in policing.
We don't need police apathy. We need police taking more action and taking these cases more seriously.
In a statement to APTN, BC RCMP said it was committed to solving the cases, stating, "We are learning from our past mistakes and are working hard to overcome historical interactions that have left prolonged feelings of being dismissed." The Vancouver Police Department gave a statement defending its investigations, saying in part that provincial policing standards dictate how police agencies conduct missing persons investigations, and it consistently solves more than 99% of missing persons cases. As for Natasha Harrison, she hopes by raising awareness, police will take cases like her daughter's more seriously.
Uphold the law, and I hope we can reach a point in our justice system where cases like these get solved instead of brushed under the rug because one person decides a human being doesn't deserve a proper investigation.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News.
And the message is loud and clear across the Northwest Territories this October 4th. Indigenous women and girls, gender diverse, two-spirit and transgender people deserve safety and equality. It's an emotional day in Denendeh as families, elders, advocates, leaders and police officers honor MMIWG2S. But it's also a time of hope and healing as participants offer prayers and march from Dilo to downtown Yellowknife. The day-long programming also included families who have lost loved ones, a candlelight vigil, and a survivor sharing circle and feast. The goal is to continue pressing the territorial government to take actions to reduce the rates of violence against Indigenous people.
I think it's important that I march for them because, I want to support them any way I can. And this way it brings awareness to these type of things. There's a lot of violence towards Aboriginal people, especially towards Aboriginal women and two-spirited. So that's what I'm here to do.
In other news, Francois Legault has been elected for a second term in a landslide victory, and a candidate in his party has made history. The first Indigenous woman elected to Quebec's National Assembly. Chouchan Bacon was on the seat when Kateri Champagne-Jourdain's victory was announced.
Je ne sais pas à quel point vous êtes conscient que ce soir, on a marqué l'histoire.
Kateri Champagne-Jourdain is the first ever Indigenous woman to be elected to Quebec's National Assembly. A newcomer to politics, she ran for Quebec's Coalition Avenir Québec Party, or CAQ.
Mais les choses vont changer pour moi, puis les choses, je l'espère, vont changer aussi grandement pour notre région.
An Innu from Uashat Nakmaniutanem, she is now a CAQ MNA for the Duplessis riding. She said she joined the CAQ because they prioritize economic development, and she said she plans to rely on her Innu culture to work with Indigenous peoples on major projects.
Pour moi, la CAQ, c'est un parti qui est pragmatique, c'est un parti d'action, c'est un parti qui livre la marchandise. C'est important pour moi parce que ce que je veux voir arriver aussi, c'est des actions.
Okay, that part really isn't important. Or I shouldn't say it isn't important. It isn't connected to what we're talking about today. So the vigil happens every year on Parliament Hill, and as you can see, it happens across communities all over Turtle Island. And I think that it's important that we continue these types of things. Again, like she said, over time, what happens is movements like this can fade and kind of get swept under the rug because they're difficult conversations. And I've said this on my stream before. Sometimes we really have to get comfortable having uncomfortable discussions about subjects like this, because without these uncomfortable discussions, then we really don't create that awareness and empathy that for the cause. And so I'd like to always kind of build that resource or give those conversations a chance here in the stream, so that people will have an opportunity to understand what's happening with Indigenous people. Because without without this education or awareness, um, people get comfortable and complicit, and that's the problem that perpetuates this ongoing systemic issue. Because things when you think of indigenous people in Turtle Island, we have the law enforcement who kill indigenous people um, with the backstory of, oh well, I saw them carrying something. It must have been a knife. It must have been a gun. It must have been a broken bottle they were going to attack with me with, etc. So whatever excuse or story that they want to put behind um, the rationale of murdering indigenous people, they'll use. And if we allow that to continue, then things like, say, Chantal Moore, for example, 26-year-old mother who lived in New Brunswick, police went to do a wellness check on her. You know, even if by some off chance that a woman who is, 5'3", 5'4", could overpower and hurt a man who is, 6'1", um, is a, it's not like it couldn't happen, but it's very unlikely that that happened. And the fact that this officer not only did he shoot her to stop her from attacking, apparently, but he shot her multiple times. When she died, and the family picked up her remains, parts of her body were amputated. Why? It just questions the authenticity of any kind of um, rationale behind her killing, and that's kind of what we're going through in Turtle Island. In our healthcare system, we have a woman in Quebec who is in a great deal of pain and having difficulty breathing, crying for help, and recording herself on her cell phone while she's um, listening to nurses mock her and um, degrade her, only to die from the lack of assistance. We have an Indigenous man, Brian Sinclair, who spent 34 hours in an emergency room for a bladder infection, which is a treatable issue, waiting to be helped only to die in the emergency room waiting to be seen. 34 hours he sat in an emergency room waiting to be seen and died of a disease that was completely treatable. So this systemic issue in our healthcare system. So we have it in our healthcare system, we have it in our police system, so we have it in our child and welfare system as we see residential schools being replaced by the fostering system. And so Manitoba has had um, something like, I think the last number I heard was 80% of all the children in the foster system in Manitoba are Indigenous children. Yet they make up probably like 5% of the actual population of Manitoba. So numbers don't seem to be on spot. As of May in 2022, Indigenous women made up 50% of the women in the Canadian prison system. Yet they make up less than 4% of the female population in Canada. So we have a systemic issue in our prison system, in our fostering system, in our law, our legal system, in our healthcare system. So the systemic issues are across the board. There's no one particular part of our um, the colonial setup on Turtle Island that hasn't created some sort of systemic issue for Indigenous people to have to deal with. So that's kind of, and now we're leading into today where the laws are making it almost impossible to uh, for murdered indigenous women to really get justice, and you'll see why when we get into the next program. So before I get into the next program, the next thing I'll share is a talk by Tamara Bernard, and Tamara Bernard is a PhD student. Um, she probably got her PhD by now, um, but she is doing a talk on the missing and murdered Indigenous women at TED Talks. And so this is gonna, it's probably about maybe, I think it's about 15 minutes or so. And then once I show this, then I'll show you a documentary that we called A Broken Trust, which will get into how our legal system on Turtle Island makes it almost um, okay to murder or rape or have missing and indigenous women go missing, and girls and two spirits, without any kind of consequences. So that will be in the documentary coming up right after this. So let me get the talk here by Tamara started. I'll get my face off the screen so I'm not obscuring the view, and then we'll continue from there.
There are so many important women in my life. Some of these women are family members, friends, colleagues. I am certain that every single person in this audience today has a woman that they love dearly. It could be their mother, their daughter, their sister, their grandmother, even a colleague. Maybe you're smiling right now because you're thinking about them. Maybe that smile changed into a chuckle because you remember a fond memory that you have with them. Do you feel that right now? All of us are reflecting on love. That love, when we close our eyes, when that sun hits our face and it warms our head all the way through our body. I encourage you all to hold on to that today because that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what is missing in society today. There is a lack of love and respect for our murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in Canada. I am not saying that there is not love. I am not saying there's opposite emotions of love towards these women, but it can be greater, much greater. I am hoping today, with the love that we've just built together by reflecting on the women and girls that we love in our lives, will encourage you to see through a new lens and light how beautiful these women are. The beautiful truth, the hidden reality. But first, Bojo, Ani, Tamara Indigenous Cause, Parbear Clan from Galway First Nation. I am an Indigenous woman that currently is challenged every day living with the intergenerational trauma of the Canadian residential school legacy, and as well as one of my family members being taken and listed with our stolen sisters. I share this because I live in this fast-paced society that is so disconnected to the land, very academically focused, very career-driven, and I'm walking it wearing a moccasin on one foot and a high heel on the other, doing my best to maintain a balance. So today when I'm speaking with you, I hope you can see how two worldviews are being weaved together to show the beautiful resiliency and strength of Indigenous women and girls living here in the physical world and in the spiritual world. I want to share that I use the term Indigenous to acknowledge all the women and girls that are status and non-status. And this is very important because the representation that we're using today in our Canadian society for our stolen sisters is based on a statistic of status women that are First Nation, Inuit, or Métis. We need to acknowledge a part of honoring them is the history of enfranchisement, where an Indigenous woman, when she married a non-status man, lost her status and Aboriginal rights, along with their children. We also need to acknowledge the 60s scoop from 1960s until the 80s, where Indigenous children were taken away from their families and communities and brought into foster care and adoption. They also lost their status and Aboriginal rights. I'm sharing this because there's hundreds of Indigenous people in our nation who are fighting for their identity and their Aboriginal rights and to regain their culture and family ties. And I want you guys to reflect upon, because they could be very visible as an Indigenous person. And statistically speaking, an Indigenous woman has higher chances of being targeted of violence compared to a non-Indigenous person in Canada. When a visible Indigenous person who does not have their status go murdered or missing, they're not acknowledged in that representation. They go into a different category. My hope here is to honor all of these women and to show how controlled the actual culture and the representation of these women are. Part of the culture is, that I'm sharing with you today is, and I'm going to share that culture is a trend. And I'm going to share it that I'm going to say that it's perhaps unintentionally this is happening in our country. But the culture of these women in research and in education and textbooks, the media, and other publications unintentionally perhaps are focusing these women as sex workers, runaways, homeless, substance abusers, and this predominantly happens in British Columbia. With that type of culture that we continue to use and educate our youth, our future 7 generations, by dishonoring our past 7 generations, where does that lead us to? I'm hoping that you will see how this culture of these women reinforce the idea that it's okay to have a lack of moral panic. And I'm saying that because that culture puts the blame back on the women. They're to blame. And when I speak about moral panic, I am not saying we don't have it, but I'm saying that it could be much larger, just like the love, and it starts with love. And when I'm saying it could be much larger, I'm talking about a moral panic that is not in just Indigenous families and communities, or in organizations or agencies led by Indigenous peoples. I'm talking about a greater moral panic that is for both nations, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, to unify together, empower one each other, and feel that same fear. That fear that something we love, our livelihood, our safety is being taken. It is a common, living, moral panic. When it's a common, it becomes a common goal to solve it. It becomes a common action together. Together, we unite, empower, and that's part of the healing, the steps that need to come forth. I share now the culture, the misrepresentation and the statistics. And I shared earlier that my family lives with a legacy of someone being taken. So tonight, as I am honoring my family's case, but I'm honoring all women in the spiritual world and on the physical world. My great-grandmother, Jane Bernard, and Doreen Hardy were taken in 1966, right here in the Thunder Bay District, and it's a cold case to this day. Now, we remember the culture. Jane, she was 43 years old. Doreen, she was 18. They were not sex workers. They were not homeless. They were not substance abusers or users. They were not runaways, and they were not in British Columbia. And more importantly, this happened in 1966, where our statistics that we use for all our research and education use a representation from 1980 to 2012. So, and they are status, so I'm sharing this to hope for you guys to shift a little and see, what are we educating our society? Because we use that education to guide our research. We use the research that comes out to guide our media. Because this type of representation not only dishonors the women in the spiritual world, but it dishonors the Indigenous women and girls here in the physical world as well. And I say that because with the lack of moral panic in that culture, it begins to question, what is my self-worth? Am I worthy of justice? Is my life as equal as a person who is not Indigenous? Am I worthy to find out why does this keep happening? So as I shared earlier, you know, my great-grandmother Jane, she's listed with the murdered and missing. And then there's my grandma, Irene, who is a survivor of violence. And there's my mother, Christiane, who's a survivor of violence. And then there's me, Tamara, a survivor of violence. That's a lot of energy, a lot of healing, a lot of questioning of my self-worth. Then you see this in the media and in education as well coming at you. It took me 8 years and counting to say, I am worthy of love. I am worthy to be loved. And this is important because so many Indigenous women and youth that I've worked with question their self-worth every day. Every day is a challenge. Every day is an obstacle to live in our society, to wonder if they're going to be safe or if their children are going to be safe. Their stories echo, much like my family echoes. But you know what else? We are more. We are so much more. We are more than murdered and missing. We are language. We are medicine. We are land. We are culture. We are life givers. We are so much more than murdered and missing. I hope today that you think, when you see our sisters in the media, our publications, our research, that you reflect upon how we are more than that. And how the hidden reality, the beauty of us is more. How our voice is more, our stories are more. To create that shift within society that needs, and that starts with love. to generate that moral panic that is needed to honor the past 7 generations and the future 7 generations. Because if we don't make that shift, I'm scared to know where our humanity is going. I am scared to see where we're going to lead our research and our education. I hope today you truly leave with not only my voice, but the hundreds of voices that I carry with me every day by working with these women and youth. I hope that we could ignite a new way of learning, doing, being, because I am Tamara Bernard, and I am more than murdered and missing. Miigwech.
Siguli, Swagwag, Geli Hindi New Get. So I want to just quickly welcome the new people in here. If it's your first time here, um, I always introduce myself as Siguli Swagwag, Geli Hindi New Get, Wagi Sliwagi Niwakitoloda, Onidag, and Gwehuenege, Ani, Bojo, Dante, Okinapi. I basically just said, hello everyone, my name is Galahindi, translates the clouds passing over in the colonial language, and I'm a member of the people of the Standing Stone First Nations of the Thames here on Turtle Island, and a part of Turtle Island that's been segregated and relabeled Canada, so the northern part. And within that definition, I'm in a small section called Southwestern Ontario on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Delaware, and Huron nations. And I appreciate you being here. If you're not familiar with my stream, typically I do 2 types of streams, either education and awareness streams or documentaries, and I do music streams where I just share music by Indigenous artists, primarily because um, a lot of them don't get the marketing, the promotion, the radio play, or even sometimes the record deals that many non-Indigenous artists get. So this is a platform that allows me to expose people to artists that they may otherwise never get a chance to hear. So anybody who hangs out, I appreciate it. If you like the content, please hit the follow button. That definitely just helps with my with my community as we grow, and also links to people that may be like-minded and be able to share. And if you're not familiar with some of the content that I share, or you have questions about it, this is a safe place to ask questions. So really, Chris, so um, I have a Discord as well. If for whatever reason um, you find that there's a subject that I'm missing, or that you just want to get more information about, let me know. You can join the Discord, make suggestions. You can also just get to know the community. And if you're a streamer, there's a promote yourself channel in the Discord. Let us know when you go live so that we can come and support you and share in your channel. And sometimes we'll build this network of communities together so that we're all kind of sharing love to each other and showing that support, because that's what Twitch is really all about, is us all building a community, and that community um, doesn't necessarily have to be just people doing educational streams. I follow so many musicians on Twitch. I actually even follow a few gamers that I really like. So don't hesitate to join the community and be part of it, regardless of what types of streams you do. Let us know, because somewhere along the lines, all of us have multiple interests, and so someone in this community may be really drawn to what you do in your content if you're a streamer. So don't hesitate to do that. Photoist, I probably said that wrong. Photoretorist, Yanko for being here. Chris Cox, Yanko and Rio Rocks, welcome to the community. I appreciate you coming in, and I hope that you find something in here So what we're talking about today is yesterday was the national calls for justice related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, Two Spirits, and others. So there's a couple of links that there that you can use. One of them is the actual report that was created related to the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And then one of them is a progress report since that was created. So the final actual inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women created a report that was published in June of 2019. And so there's a link there that now shows the progress since 2019, where we were, where we are now. Sigoli Lasu, and anybody who's been in here for any length of time will probably already know who Lasu is. If you don't, Lasu is an Indigenous educator as well and streamer here on Twitch. So hit his channel up when you get a chance, and because he's been doing this even longer than I have. So he's been probably 2 years, if I remember, just recently, 2 year celebration. So now those links, I think, are a start. Now, if you're an Indigenous person who knows somebody who or part of a family, that family and survivors circle is a great resource for just getting together and getting to talk with others who are in the same boat or who have someone who's been in the same boat that can help. So again, like I was saying earlier, is that the issues on Turtle Island that we have to deal with are going to be systemic issues in the legal system when we're watching law enforcement kill our indigenous people, systemic issues in the healthcare system when we see people um, who are being ridiculed and dying because not receiving help by nurses, which is completely unacceptable, and and something that could have been prevented, or some of our people who are sitting in emergency rooms who have treatable issues dying because people either assume or all due to the stereotypes and racism that happens to weave its way through the whole systemic part of the healthcare system, they're dying in the emergency rooms for things that would take 5 minutes for a doctor to see and attribute to antibiotics or medicine of some kind that would to deal with that. We have the residential school survivors, which we were talking about earlier, for National Truth and Reconciliation Day, which we just had, and and then now we have the calls to justice for missing and murdered and women, which happened. Our National Day was yesterday, and we had that vigil on Parliament Hill, which I was showing earlier. So if you just got here, that's kind of where we're at, and I've just kind of caught you up on everything that we've discussed so far. So. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to share the documentary I was talking about. This is called A Broken Trust. And part of this documentary, they're going to talk about the reason why our colonial laws right now make it almost desirable, if you're going to be a predator, to target anyone, to target indigenous women, girls, and Two Spirit, and you'll understand a little bit more as to why that is. So before I start this, because I know it's about 45 minutes long, um, I'm going to give you a chance to go grab a drink, go grab a snack, whatever you might want to do before I start this. And so, what I'm going to share in the meantime, while you're grabbing a drink, you can also listen to this. Is there is a new rendition of The Peaceful Warrior, which was just given to me like yesterday. So you guys are going to be seeing this. Anyone in my community is going to be seeing this for the very first time. And let me go in here, see if I can. find this. I'm going to play this while you grab a drink. I'm going to grab a coffee. So I'm going to play this so that you can see the Peaceful Warrior Project. Now, again, for those of you who don't know what the Peaceful Warrior Project is, that would be the new people. Um, there's a little kind of blurb on it. So I'm going to get my face off the screen again, and I'm going to start this while you guys grab your drinks and snacks, and then we'll get into the documentary.
Our names are Marin Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. What are we doing here? What do we really want to say? This world has got to change its way. We're going to battle for the red, white, yellow, and black. Fight for the ones who can't fight back. Oh, we're talking about all the creatures, from the water to the sky. Talking about the issues, from the truth to the lies. Gonna make my stand with a paper and a pen. You wanna argue that? Go back to bed again. 'Cause you're never gonna win against what I stand for. So sit down and shut up and listen as I give my grand tour. I'm gonna target the corruption in our government, target the poison in our environment, the injustices to the people. Hit every target, I won't keep still. Gonna battle the battles, shake up the cage till it rattles. 'Cause you'll never get rid of me till all of us are free. Our names are Marin Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. Gonna fight for the red, white, yellow, and black. Gonna fight for the ones who can't fight back. Let's keep passing around information, improve the planet through education. Make the people aware, make everybody care. Pass my message on if you dare. Mine or yours, we all gotta share. There's more power in one person's voice than any weapon of choice. Our names are Marin Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. But we won't be able to move this world all alone. Just remember, this is also your home. So if I put my voice with your voice, and we all shout together, people are gonna hear us. Things are gonna get better. Our names are Marin Reese. We're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. All senseless attacks we see must cease.
So that was the Peaceful Warrior as done by the Bylines. So anyone who hasn't shown or hasn't heard of the Bylines, definitely, if you're into some jazzy music, the Bylines are the an awesome couple to join, and they're so welcoming and supportive of the channel here too. So the next thing, just getting to this file, is this is again, like I said, it's about 45 minutes. This is called A Broken Trust. And this is really focused on the sexual assault on our tribal lands and why people are able to really get away with what they do. So I hope that you got your snacks and drinks and are ready to learn and maybe even your tissues. So let me again get my face off the screen here, and I will get this started. And let me go.
There's very few places, in the country that you can see the sky like you do in Montana. There's just things that you cannot find, no matter where you go, that are always going to be at home. You look at a map of reservations, they're so desolate and isolated. One of the things that I've seen now with youth, I'm going to do something great with my life so I can leave the reservation, so I can get off the reservation.
It's hard living here, and when you're a kid, you don't understand that living here is different from living somewhere else.
When I was growing up, my grandmother, she always used to do this thing, don't cry, my girl, don't cry. Back when I was 15, 14, it was easier just to pretend. I'm just gonna pretend that it didn't happen.
It's not easy facing the person that sexually assaulted you. You gotta stand up and find that courage to look your aggressor in the face, and go about your daily life. In a perfect world, it wouldn't happen. But we don't live in a perfect world.
You're never going to be at the same place you were before all this happened. Looking back, I didn't realize what I was doing could be labeled as strong.
Where's yours?
Shooting is an activity that allows us to just relax and get rid of all the things that you worry about. Go for that tiny one. Whatever you were going through the week doesn't seem to matter by the time you're done. Nope, all gone. My husband, we've got married in 2015. It's difficult. I mean, I could go through the motions, but anytime an intimate moment happened, I would become withdrawn. To trust somebody, after sexual assault, it has been so difficult to work through that. I was a victim when I was 13, a victim when I was 14, and a victim when I was 34. Some people say there's signs that something's wrong with this child. Well, you took a look at my grades, they were perfect. I was good at pretending nothing happened. Nothing happened. I wasn't that girl. When I was 13, that one didn't get reported. It was a first cousin. When I was 14, I worked for the Bureau of Land Management. They told me, oh, well, you know, you go out and ride with this guy. It was okay at first. Well, then we went down on the bottom road. It was in a wooded area, trees, absolutely nobody around. Then the incident happened and the whole situation confused me. What am I gonna do? I can't scream, nobody's gonna hear me. I can't run, where am I gonna run to? When I finally was able to mutter stop, he did stop. Then he took me back like nothing happened.
When you talk to Native women who have lived their whole lives on a reservation and they say, I can't think of any woman that I know who hasn't been victimized in this way. Native women have told me that what you do when you raise a daughter in this environment is you prepare her for what to do when she's raped, not if, but when. The federal government defines your identity as an Indian or a non-Indian. The same crime committed on the same plot of land can change jurisdiction or power depending on the race of the perpetrator and the race of the victim. When we think about sexual assault in the United States, it's sort of a linear understanding of how the justice system works. When we move that same crime into Indian country, onto a reservation, then you take that already difficult system and you add all these extra pieces to it, where you have the federal government, tribal government, maybe even the state government. It becomes much more complex. It makes that conviction even more difficult to attain. If one agency drops the ball or one piece of evidence doesn't get collected correctly, the whole house of cards falls. And so you take all of the baggage that you already bring when a survivor comes forward and you completely manipulate all of these questions about jurisdiction and land and race, and sometimes nothing happens as a result.
The city of Wolf Point is a very small town. You know, we're hundreds and hundreds of miles from any large metropolitan area. We are not similar to the rural America, small, sleepy little town. We have sexual crime constantly. Wolf Point sits on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. I mean, we're a tiny, tiny little department. The tribal government has authorized us and our officers to enforce their law on tribal members on tribal lands. Here on the reservation, 60 and 70% of all them kids, female especially, that live here, that they're in danger of somehow being assaulted sexually. Whether it was at a very, very young age or several times after they reached a mature age, they have been victimized. It is nothing. It is absolutely nothing for us to see an 8 to a 10-year-old completely sexually active. And I completely sexually active. So do I think sexual assaults are horribly common here? Yeah, absolutely. I think we only know about the tip of them.
Every statistic that is given to a Native American child, I was that statistic. Sexual assault isn't what somebody brings up around the dinner table. I think it's the shame of it. don't want everybody knowing what happened. When you're a kid, you don't understand that living here is different from living somewhere else.
Did you take some of these?
I was a mom at 15. I was a mom again at 18. I was a mom again at 20. I have wanted to be a foster parent since I knew what it was like to be taken by a family that wasn't yours. Somebody that has given you that love and that stability and that safety.
You should go find a book and read. Yeah, you.
Very rewarding when you could give the comfort and the safety to a child who may have not known it before they came to your home.
Do we need to stick you in a bubble, my son?
Yes.
I have 5 kids in my home. I definitely didn't have the life that my kids do.
I still see you. You're still doing chores.
Everything in this life is for my kids.
Jamie, please.
Bye. I love you. Bye. Bye, Jamie.
They will never grow up like I did. I have worked night shift since the beginning of my career, where somebody sees the worst traumatic experience of their life. I see this is what happens every night. As a woman police officer, I could understand how scared they are. I could understand, the unwanted sexual experience they just had. 9 times out of 10, I don't know what happens after they leave the hospital. I don't know what happens after I get my statement, after I do my report. Just to be that little bit of hope for them at that moment. You be their strength when they don't have any.
We've had young cops that come in one day and they got all their shit and they drop it on the floor and say, "You guys don't pay me enough to work at this place," and they head out.
It's hard to be a police officer here. It's hard to see the bad, and it's constant.
Little Bot Fort Peck, for those that don't know, it's in the very northeast corner of Montana. We do have over 2 million acres, and our population it's over 10,000, but it's a large area with little resources. We have a problem with drugs, substance abuse, those issues. We don't have the money to hire licensed addiction counselors. We don't have the manpower in law enforcement. Everything affects everything else. So our problems all the way around, it's a domino effect. I am the chief judge for the Fort Peck Assiniboine and Sioux tribes. A lot of the families that we see in court, they are living 1, 2, 3 families in one home. The housing shortage, it becomes an issue. Along with the sex assault, we always come down to what are some of the underlying issues, and a lot of it that we've seen is there's drugs and alcohol involved. The trauma that has developed, over the generations. Some of the assaults are generational and they're within, the same home. Pretend it wasn't there and maybe it will go away, the next generation, it won't happen again, but it continues.
One of the things we do know nationally is that very, very, very few people who are sexually assaulted decide to report the crime. But I think Native women are probably less likely because the system is so broken. And a lot of times when I try to explain it, people don't even believe me because it's so bizarre. And the reason it's bizarre is because there's been this patchwork of laws that don't talk to each other over the last century. It's not just what happened at that one night in that one place. There's a whole history and a whole culture and a whole society. Oh, here it is, the Muskogee Treaty, my ancestors' treaty. And it's from 1790, right after the Revolution, so right after the Constitution. And then here's our Trail of Tears, where Alabama and Georgia now meet, was our original territory. And then we're marched here to Indian Territory. This is the army forcing you, you know, and so in a conflict zone today, we understand that there's a lot of sexual assault going on, and that's essentially what was going on here. While we're on these trails, people are dying from hunger and fatigue. By the time we got here, we had so much trauma, you know, just the movement itself would have been bad enough. Tribes were forced, in some cases, to cede millions of acres. We're going to take all this land, but we're going to reserve to you, this tribe, this area, and that will be your area. Within the boundaries, which were often defined in the treaties, that's considered Indian country, and that's where the tribe is going to have power, but they're also going to share that power with the federal government. The treaties that were signed by tribal leaders sort of acquiesced to this idea that the government's going to take care of us now. The federal government essentially said, you will give us your land. In exchange, we will make sure that you are kept safe, secure, fed, clothed, housed. That's the trust responsibility. Now, today, it has even a broader connotation. Federal agencies are supposed to be providing those same benefits. So whether that's law enforcement, whether that's a hospital, whether that's a school. But what comes along with that is a form of paternalism, where the United States is sort of our guardians, and we are the wards, and we benefit from their benevolence. So that then conflicts with the idea that tribal nations want to be sovereign and have full authority on their lands. But tribes really need the trust responsibility in many cases because they were so poor.
Copy, 2051.
We're like every other reservation across the United States. We're like a third world country. 1 year of experience here is like 10 years experience in a city. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is responsible for providing many programs in Indian country. Law enforcement is just one of those programs. They oversee our spending, our manpower. Are we keeping records correctly? Are we investigating cases correctly?
10-15 male traveler at your bind.
The biggest thing in a sexual assault case is we have to take care of that victim. Being that we're so short-handed, it can be frustrating if we have to choose. Do we let our evidence go or do we stay with our victim? Knowing that he's the only one on that night, and sometimes we have to leave that scene unsecured. If I leave, this evidence here could be destroyed. Now, most of the time we don't have a problem securing the crime scene, but it has happened.
Jail and crossing into jail. Those are your tribal rights, okay?
We should have 21 police officers. Right now, we're down 9 positions, and that's not a lot of people. We have a hiring pool that is literally nothing here on the reservation. Even though we open it up to off-reservation people, we've had some applicants, but there's no place to live here, so people don't want to come here. There's no houses for sale, no houses for rent. Where's that person going to live? The officers who are stuck here now are constants. They're waiting for it to get better, but a couple of them will tell us, man, I'm getting burnt out. I want to do something else, but I don't want to leave you guys high and dry. I know what the problem is. I can see what it is, but I don't know if you want to blame the BIA, the federal government.
Well, I don't think anyone in law enforcement anywhere in the United States would ever tell you that they have enough resources, but we do very well with the resources that we have. We always want more because we can do more if we have more. The BIA has a trust responsibility to provide the law enforcement, the public safety for Indian country. Places where we have limited resources, we do see violent crime rates to tend to be higher.
Hey buddy, better start making your way home. It's almost 11, almost curfew. Stick close to your yard.
Pisses me off that somebody could take a child's innocence. The only sexual assaults I know are the ones that I take the reports on. I could assume how often it happens. That's not a place you want your mind to wander.
Dispatch.
97 in the area. You guys are out after curfew. What about these two? Where do you guys belong? Take them all to the PD.
Okay, let's go.
You two in this car over here. A curfew isn't in effect because we're mean people. You guys don't understand the dangers that can happen after night to a child who is defenseless against an adult.
Can you explain to me why there's a curfew?
Because there's people out here that roam around.
And they can hurt you.
Yeah.
We begin tonight with what one Cascade County judge describes as the harshest sentence he's ever given. Today, Richard Tome was sentenced to life in the Montana State Prison for raping a 13-year-old developmentally
was sentenced to 50 years in the Montana State Prison for raping a woman outside of a
pleaded guilty to raping a Helena girl under the age of 7, has been sentenced to 35 years in prison.
Sentenced to 100 years in prison for sexual assault.
You know, for victims, when they know that options like that exist 25, 50 years, it's like this huge number to them. And then they come to tribal court and they're like, 1 year, just 1 year. How could it just be 1 year? We don't agree either, but that's how it is.
If a tribal court exercises criminal jurisdiction, they can take a rape case. There's two main restrictions, though. One, if it involves a non-Indian defendant, they can't. The other limitation is a sentencing cap. Congress passed a law that said you can only sentence an offender to 1 year, maximum. And that would be for any crime. That includes homicide, it includes child sexual abuse, it includes rape. When you think about rape and you think about somebody who's a perpetrator of that kind of crime, and you think, what do they deserve? 1 year doesn't usually sound like the right answer. You know, the federal government doesn't have those kinds of limitations. So if you have a rape case or a child sex abuse case and you do want to see that perpetrator put away, the best possibility for you is that it will go federal. As they say, go federal.
The unanimous conclusion is that the primary...
And if it goes federal, the prosecutor is actually the United States Attorney. U.S. Attorney's offices, they're primarily doing kind of high-stakes, white-collar crime, major drug trafficking rings, terrorism or immigration. So it's very different than what anybody else who's experienced a sexual assault will go through, because 99% of the time, it's a local state crime.
The issue of violence against women in Indian country is a significant issue and one that we take very seriously. But inherently, there's always going to be difficulties proving these type of crimes because they're often committed in private, and it's often difficult to find corroborating evidence.
When a prosecutor decides not to take a case forward for many different kinds of reasons, and some of them are valid, right? Sometimes they just don't have what they need to put a case together. That means there's no indictment, there's no trial, there's no verdict.
Numerous cases are declined for insufficient evidence, and it is something that has to be worked on. Now, there are bigger questions of jurisdiction here that perhaps Congress wants to look at. Tribes certainly need to look at. Our job is to enforce the law, and we'll work with whatever framework we're given, and right now this is the framework we have to work in.
Having the federal government involved in crime control in Indian country hasn't really resulted in anything super fantastic. If over half of Native women report that they've been victims of sexual violence, whatever system's in place is not working.
When my mom reported it, they were asking me all sorts of questions, and finally I said, you know what? I was 14 years old. I did not have the right to consent to a man as old as my father to do those things to me. I said, that's the law. That's the bottom line. I was adamant that he wasn't going to do that to anybody else. I was going to survive and move forward and do what I had to do. The defendant, he pled guilty. My biggest frustration is that he got off with 3 years probation. He was back in the community quickly, and I had to see him when this was all fresh. And here I am with all these issues because of those events that will never go away. I don't have so much hurt now as opposed to anger. Justice wasn't served, in my opinion. 3 years probation for fucking up my entire life, excuse my language. I guess I could feel lucky that I got a conviction. Some cases don't get a conviction.
There are many places where the relationship between the federal government and the local tribal officials has been working quite well. But, each reservation is different. Eventually, tribes are going to want to strengthen their government such that they don't need that help from the outside.
Tribes and the federal government trying to get along, that's not a solvable problem. Many tribes in the Great Plains, they just live on federal dollars. We're fortunate to not have to be dependent upon that. We're probably the wealthiest tribe in the Great Plains. This here road will go right into the new aquatic center. Baseball diamonds, basketball courts, horseshoes, mini golf. We used oil money to build these houses, and it was for the sole purpose of staffing so we could get professionals here. We're at a level in the new millennium where we have the wealth and we have the intellectual capacities. We can do a much better job than what we're doing right now to protect our women and children and have justice for them, because that's what a great nation will do. At every level, we are not adequately functioning to provide the services that are needed in a critical situation. The number of rapes and assaults on women and children is underreported. There are very few federal cases that go. There's no justice at the police level, at the court system level. The state is in a state of emergency. It's in a state of crisis.
It almost seems like a roller coaster around here with sexual assault. Sometimes we do really good and it goes all the way to prosecution real quick, and sometimes it just seems to fall through the cracks.
Yeah, it's
We're advocates. We help get justice for sexual assault victims. We're their liaison between law enforcement, the court, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're with them beginning to end.
We actually do the criminal investigations the BIA does for Berthold. Any sexual assault throughout Indian country should be reported up to the FBI as well. Both of us have jurisdiction out there to work those type of cases, so it could go to either place, and the tribes have to refer it to one of us.
A lot of times that don't happen like that. Maybe some of our officers, they don't trust the feds and they think we need to do things ourselves. That's where my office has had to step up and give reports to the FBI as well of things that we know have happened. We make sure we take good notes so we can give them to whoever needs them. This actually should be all taken care of by law enforcement, not us. I can't write out an indictment. I can't go to grand jury and present a case.
The fact that it is so confusing and that you could have up to 3 different departments that had jurisdiction, it really is a maze. If the goal is conviction, there has to be clear lines of communication and partnership.
Once you guys came and started asking questions, I thought, you know what, I don't know the answers to these things and I need to find out. That's part of the reason why we're doing the case file review. And I guess part of that is on me too. I should know this by now. Sometimes we don't get our reports in right away, and that's because there's so much work coming in, which is unfortunate for the victim. The FBI, BIA, they're swamped, so sometimes those cases just don't move as quickly as we'd like.
The U.S. Attorney's Office tells us that our agents are doing really well. We hear from some folks locally that maybe say something different.
When there's poor relationships between these different law enforcement agencies, who loses? The victims are the ones that then fall through the cracks. With the hard feelings that have come through history, there's distrust, valid distrust on the part of some tribal officials to the federal government. But she doesn't care. She wants justice.
I came back 11 years ago now to help our reservation. But now I want it safe so my daughters are safe here. Kids used to ride everywhere. There'd be packs of kids running around this town when I first moved home. If you drive down these roads, you don't see kids riding bike outside anymore. And it's an emotional thing to talk about because we've had to go back to high school students and talk about safety. If you don't send it to the feds and we prosecute them through tribal court, they're only going to get days in jail. And if they leave the reservation, then they're not held and bound by it. Like if you were prosecuted through the federal government, it'll follow you everywhere. Something that happens with tribal court could be swept under the rug. This is why we need the feds to make sure that our victims are getting the justice that they deserve.
We need the feds right now because tribes are struggling to stand up on their own and do the kinds of rape prosecutions we might want to see. Until tribes are able to have full jurisdiction restored, there is a place for the federal system. When Obama became president, it really felt like the first time that there was a federal presence that was like, we could really do something about this. And so they ended up putting together the Tribal Law and Order Act, and there's a bunch of different pieces to it. But the one change that mattered the most for survivors was a change in the sentencing authority of tribal courts. We got 3 years as opposed to 1. All tribes have 1 year. That's the law. If you check off all of these boxes, then we will let you sentence somebody to 3 years. A lot of tribes have just said no. We need to be able to be independent and make our own decisions about how we want to run our court system. So thank you, but no thank you. And other tribes have had to struggle to meet all of these requirements so that they can actually exercise that 3-year sentence. And it's expensive, and so most tribes can't afford it. They have to have a court of record, which is expensive. You need a prosecutor, you need a public defender, you need a judge. There's very few Native lawyers in this country. How are you going to recruit somebody with that skill set to come out and live in a remote area that they're not from, where there's not really any housing for outsiders, and develop that infrastructure for a criminal justice system? It's just more difficult than anyone can imagine.
When the Tribal Law and Order Act took effect, I remember thinking, how are we going to do this? We didn't have any attorneys in the court system at that time. We had prosecutors, judges that had been in the system and knew the system, worked in it for a long time, but were just missing the degree. I wanted to make sure that our court was ready to move forward. Fort Peck is the only tribe right now in our region that is doing enhanced sentencing under the Tribal Law and Order Act. I went to school for my law degree specifically to come back here for my people.
My shoes! My shoes!
Sophia is 6 years old right now, and when I went to law school, she was 6 months old. I had to leave her for the first semester, basically, and hope that everybody was going to be able to take care of her in my absence. When I moved back here, I was so much more grateful for all of those things that I had missed. Yeah, the resources are limited, but the biggest resource is your family and your support system. I feel fortunate that, my daughters, they're not by any means afraid to speak their mind.
It was big as this living room, Mom.
Yeah.
And I'm so close to doing that.
I tell them things like, you're our future. You girls are going to be setting examples for other kids, and you're going to be leaders of our tribe someday. You better go in and get your book then, okay?
I can't wait to spinning all
right. They see the news that we read with, missing and murdered, and I talk about self-defense and not being afraid to speak up for yourself. I haven't sheltered them in a sense of the topics that we'll talk about. Talking about those not so comfortable things goes a long way.
When you have limited space and resources, you have to make hard decisions. You might say, well, let's go ahead and rely on the federal government until we have the capacity to do it on our own. But it still feels like, maybe to a survivor, the tribal justice system isn't taking her case seriously.
So we hear it all the time. Well, it doesn't matter. You guys are just going to let them go. Well, that's not the officer. I mean, their jails half the time overpopulated.
Do you want to have a seat on the bench?
I'm sorry, Mom. Stand up.
Our jail is always full. It's always at capacity. We don't have a lot of money, and if there's some people that need medical care and we're not able to pay it, then we'll put them on house arrest, and then they can pay for their own medical.
Go ahead and turn around and have a seat.
Tribal jail isn't seen as a punishment. They have a bed to sleep in. They get 3 meals. They have a place to stay. They're not wandering the streets, and especially when it's cold out.
If they know they're being charged or sent to tribal court, that is no sweat. They have zero fear in regards to their own court system.
The system definitely needs some improvement, but where do you start? Had I thought that it would happen a third time? Never. I had worked in the courts, so I knew it would have been hard to get a conviction in that case. It would have been he said, she said. Who's more credible? can prosecutors prove their case? And do I want to go through and relive that for a maybe? Not after dealing with the other 2 times. It's harder now at 39 telling my story than it was at 15 because I know more things now.
When the system has failed you time and time and time again, you don't feel empowered. You don't feel like you want to stand up and speak out and report people and accuse people. It feels like a disconnect between this moment of Me Too and the reality of Indian country sexual assault. A lot of Native women would look at that and kind of laugh, like that would never happen here. Even if there was a Bill Cosby here and there were 21 victims, right? It still wouldn't matter.
I just know that when you are sexually assaulted, that it never leaves you. You never 100% get over it. I just don't know what it would be like to... I guess I do know what it would be like to have to run into that person that, you know, raped you, molested you, sexually assaulted you. And to have to face them, it takes a lot of courage to report it, but it takes even more courage to have to face them. And it's not just in the courtroom, it's in everyday life. You know, every single emotion that you went through, and then somebody else telling you, you know, the details of them being sexually assaulted. It's not easy to hear somebody else's story, to be that scared, vulnerable person you were when you were sexually assaulted. It's not easy pushing those feelings back. That fear that's always a constant in the back of your mind. And then having, you know, children and hoping that they never feel that.
It's so important to us that my children know their heritage and their culture and where they're from. My daughters, they're 1 and 3. My boys, they know about respecting women and respecting partners. I'm breaking the cycle in my own family, but we need to do it nationwide. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going on this vicious cycle. Just because we have a card that says we're enrolled members, we're still citizens of the United States, but we're also citizens of our nations. Why are we different than every other person? Why don't we have the justice everybody else does?
The United States Commission on Civil Rights, they've issued now 2 reports that both skewered the federal government, said the level of underfunding in Indian country is embarrassing and shameful. You're failing. You are failing these people. And there's been no response to it. It's not going to be a quick fix. What we have to do is continually go back to Congress with the notes that we have from the ground and to say, all right, we need more, and here's what it is. The laws are causing us more pain, and I do believe that I do believe that will change someday.
Deb Holland, she is one of two Native American women, the first Native American women to be elected to the United States Congress.
Tonight we made history.
Gosh, on election night, when 2 Native women got into Congress, I mean, I can't tell you how that felt.
As a member of the United States Congress, we all take an oath, and I take this oath seriously because every congressional leader has a responsibility to uphold the federal government's trust responsibility.
I think, she can't make one bill pass. She can't pass a law by herself. But we have a lot better chance at getting traction on something when she's there than when there are no Native women in Congress at all.
Investigating these crimes and acting timely on the cases.
Thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor to be asked a question by you right now. Yes, the federal government has taken over in many cases, but tribes are continuing to fight to make sure that at the end of the day, they are able to define what is right and what is wrong and do it on their own terms.
All of your work is so important, and I'm grateful for every single thing all of you have done to raise this issue, and I want you to know that I stand behind you 100%.
I get a lot of credit for work that I do, but that's a burden to carry on your shoulders if you feel like you're the only one in that community who's really speaking out. Those people are my inspiration. I see strong women who may have bad days, but they're the ones that are in their home communities that are doing the hard work that nobody wants to hear about. They're the heroes. Those people are amazing. Those women are amazing.
I may fit into all the statistic criteria. Fine. I'm still going to have a good life. I am still going to keep pushing forward. There's no other option. This is my community. This is where I've grown up and made memories. I feel like if I'm not here putting my best foot forward and forgetting everything that happened the day before, who else is going to? Who else is going to be here to be somebody else's hope?
Sugali Swagweg, Galahindi New Gets again. I hope that you found that educational or at least got something away from that. I know that I've said this before is our stories really have to continually be told because without us telling our own stories, you're going to get a Eurocentric slanted history, which is only going to portray the colonial governments in a positive way. This stories like this that we share are try to counter that and bring um, more truth in history that people are hearing versus this uh, media speak that oftentimes is very Eurocentric. So I always appreciate everybody who has a willingness to watch streams that are more about education and truth telling than the ones in the mainstream media present. So anyway, that was uh, a documentary called Broken Trust, and it really, as you could tell, focused on uh, the complexities of how these governments are in different levels of government and representatives of different um, law enforcement agencies really kind of create um, chaos and don't really smooth things out the way that they should be streamlined. And and like Lawsu has said, and we kind of discussed this in the last stream, is that truth and reconciliation is kind of uh, a process. So the first step and probably the most important step is getting the truth out, getting the real sorry, I can't believe this happened kind of attitude to change from this has happened, now what do we do? Because until people really come to terms with the fact that this history exists and is actually here and live, and colonialism isn't gone anywhere. It's still alive and healthy today, and we can see that when we see people, police officers still killing indigenous people and having no consequences. We see that when people die in hospitals, indigenous people die in hospitals for treatable things. We see that when the education system continues to teach uh, a Euro slanted history. We see that when we are showing our sovereign nations like Wet'suwet'en still being invaded by the colonial military law enforcements. So we still see that when indigenous women are still going missing. We see that when we are looking at the limited and underfunded support systems for our residential school students and their families and a way towards healing. So there are on so many different levels systemic racism and colonialism continues today and is as healthy as it can be. So that is not going to change until we get the truth part of this, our history and our stories and our issues put out there. And that's why I do what I do. That's why Dan and Mary Lou Smoke have been doing what they do for the last 30 plus years. That's why Law Sue does what he does. It's a way of us being able to put out the real stories versus the stuff that you're going to hear in the mainstream. And I'm so appreciative of those who are coming here and showing their willingness to learn and open their eyes to an aspect of the society on Turtle Island that is not necessarily pretty. Well, it's not pretty. I mean, there's no way of putting this in a bow tie. It's just, this is the reality. And indigenous people live this and deal with this every day and ongoing. And so we want that to stop. We want it to change. And so this is the only way we can do this is by, even if it's grassroots to start with, uh, this is a way for us to spread our voice and to collectively gather more voices to join us in this movement. So again, I appreciate everyone for coming out. I have to get ready for work, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play one more rendition of The Peaceful Warrior. This also is brand new. I just got this a couple of days ago. This is another UK group, and again, for those of you who don't know what it is, I'll put the low blurb in there. Also, for those who want to learn more about what we were talking about today, there's a link to the actual report on the missing and murdered Indigenous women. So yesterday, October 4th, every year, is a day to call for justice for the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirits. And that was yesterday. We had a vigil on Parliament Hill, and so we're just trying to share this information because our government cannot be complicit in its action in taking to address this. So, yeah, I'll get that to you, Los. So there's also a report on the progress, or what progress we've made, in that link as well. And then the last link in that is for survivors, family, can get help, emotional support, and counseling, etc., and talk to other survivors and families of survivors, and families of those who did not survive, have gone missing and either never to be found, or if they were found, they were found murdered, etc. So that's the Family Survivors Circle.ca. So I hope that those links help people. And this is going to be an ongoing process. We are going to have to continually tell these stories and share this content, and this is not going to stop until we start seeing the truth being acknowledged and recognized by everyone, because everyone has to be on the same page. So I'm going to get this in here, and I will get you a link, Lasu, so you can share that as well. In the meantime, please stick around for the raid. I'm going to get my face off the screen here while I play this. And this is by a couple in the UK called the Waxbirds, and their rendition of my song. And speaking of, this is an interesting take on my song, but they also modified the lyrics slightly to include the women who cut their hair, and I believe it was Iran, the Iranian women who cut their hair in the streets in protest. So they reference that in this song as well, because they wanted to include that, because women, Indigenous women all over the world, Australia, New Zealand, Turtle Island, and Iran, all have to deal with a patriarchal system that allows them to be abused still.
Hi, we're the Waxbirds. This is our rendition of Peaceful Warrior. We are the birds and we stand for peace, and we long for every war to cease. So what are we doing here? What do we have to say? This world has got to change. I'm gonna fight for the ones that cannot fight. Oh, the creatures from the water to the skies. Separate the truth and the lies. We're gonna make our stand.
And again, just one more Yanko for everyone for being here. The other thing also, I just also want to again say a Yanko to Real John Doe for resubbing 3 months now using your Prime, and Chrysanthemum resubbed using her Prime again as well for 4 months. So the support is appreciated, and thank you so much. I was just looking to see who was online. I'm not seeing anyone that I'm really is doing any kind of chat streams. So I'm gonna raid into a nice, actual, very calming musician. She is plays uh, harmonica. She plays guitar. She plays piano, and she's very kind and open and welcoming as well. And her name is Dramona, and I hope you'll join me in going over and saying hi to Dramona, because I'm sure that after this kind of stream that you just dealt with or listened to, Dramona will be a nice, refreshing, relaxational kind of thing that you can kind of help uh, get this out of your frame of mind for temporarily, while we go over and see someone just to enjoy some chill music. So come with me and we'll go over and see Dramona now. And again, Yanko, everyone, for being here.
August summer night, such as passing by.